This is Talking Mule Deer with your hosts Steve Belinda and Jodi Stemler. Talking Mule Deer takes you on a journey to learn more about the Mule Deer Foundation, mule deer and black-tailed deer biology and management, tips and tactics for hunting, conservation issues, and even features some of our corporate and celebrity partners. Now, let's start talking mule deer.
This is Jodi Stemler. We are talking mule deer at the 2019 SHOT Show.
And I'm Steve Belinda, and our guests right now are from Federal Premium Ammunition, Mr. Ryan Bronson and Mr. John Zinnel. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, happy to be here.
Now, you may recognize John Zinnel's name because previous to his move over to Federal Premium, John was Mule Deer Foundation's youth programs coordinator for quite a long time and helped to launch the Mule Deer Foundation's M.U.L.E.Y program, right?
Yeah, so I spent about 5 or 6 years there with the organization and working to get the M.U.L.E.Y program implemented in with the chapters and get it off on a good start, and now it's just grown from there. It's an amazing deal.
It is amazing, isn't it?
And if you read the jacket of the magazine, the small print, you'll notice Ryan's name, and it's really small print because he's on the board of directors of the Mule Deer Foundation.
But I think alphabetically I'm first in the board of directors, so I'm at the top.
There you go. You know, we've all got something.
Yeah.
But yes, so Ryan is on the board of directors for the Mule Deer Foundation. And Ryan, you also are very, very active on a policy level with a number of conservation organizations as well. So thank you for your leadership and all of that.
No, happy to do it. I've had 6 good years on the board of the Mule Deer Foundation. It's been a good time.
Yeah, well, we appreciate your service. So, guys, we have a couple of different things to talk about today because, John, I know you, again, coming through Mule Deer Foundation and you're the youth programs. Federal is taking a tremendous leadership role on youth engagement, and I know that my daughter has shot through a 4-H club, and I have seen your name on things coming through my 4-H list, and I'm like, I know him. So tell us a little bit about your youth programs and initiatives and what you're doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Federal's been around and involved in the R3 programs far before R3 was really a term that was used within the industry and outside the industry.
Recruitment, retention, reactivation, right?
Yep, absolutely. So like you mentioned, the 4-H program, we've supported the 4-H, and we're actually at the table when the 4-H shooting sports was founded. So we've been there. We're their longest standing partner, and so we do a lot of different programs with them. But one that you mentioned was a sales program that we're able to support local organizations, 4-H shooting sports, competitive clay target shooting, the NRA, a lot of different CMP rifle teams and that type of deal where we can get ammunition to those kids and their parents and program leaders so that they can go and practice and go through the programs and become successful shooters. And eventually wildlife conservation is tied back into there through multiple organizations, including the Mule Deer Foundation and the M.U.L.E.Y program, where we try to tie that together and give them a next step. So they may come into a youth shooting sports organization and get the opportunity to learn about firearm safety and learn about participation in that, and then kind of pass it on to the conservation side of things where, the Mule Deer Foundation can come in with the M.U.L.E.Y program and they can talk about, the wildlife conservation and the things that are affecting the West and, migration corridors and all sorts of different things and kind of tie it together and pass it on for that next step.
Outstanding. So, obviously one of the things many of us know about is the Pittman-Robertson, Dingell-Johnson, the Federal Aid and Wildlife Restoration Program, which is based on excise taxes. And I seem to remember a year or so ago, amongst your brands, you guys, that's a big part of what you have to pay into and are very proud of your role in supporting state wildlife conservation efforts. Tell me a little bit about how that works within your programs.
So Federal was founded in 1922, so we existed for 15 years before Pittman-Robertson even became an actual thing. And it's an 11% excise tax that we pay on all of our ammunition products that we sell commercially in the U.S. And our average in Pittman-Robertson tax payments over the last 5 years has been $85 million a year. So,
and I'm picturing you right now with your finger up to the corner of your mouth, $1 million.
I kind of wanted to do it, but that seemed pretentious for the podcast. But
well, considering it is a podcast that you're listening to, not watching.
Right. So, the Pittman-Robertson Fund has really been the underpinning, the financial backbone for conservation since 37 when it became a thing. It's what's enabled state wildlife agencies to protect their license fee dollars because they're commingled with those federal funds, and they can't be used on anything else. And one of the cool things about Pittman-Robertson funds is even when there is a government shutdown, like what was experienced earlier this year, the federal aid is still there because it's a permanent fund and it's allocated, and so those offices are still working through that whole shutdown. It's really a fund that was so smart when they put it together because it's been protected from Congress from raiding it for other things, and it protects state governments from trying to raid it and use it to pay for roads or education or health care. It can only be used to pay for conservation and hunter education and shooting range development. We're the largest taxpayer in the industry of that tax, together with our sister company, Savage Arms, CCI, and Spear. So we're proud of that. We're pretty protective of that because that fund is so valuable to what our state wildlife agencies are doing, which are important for our business long term. And the partnerships with organizations like Mule Deer Foundation and all the critter groups that are working with state wildlife agencies, helping spend those dollars so that we've got habitat on the ground. Hey, we're happy that we're the ones that write that check. But we also want people to know we write that check, that the money is coming from the firearms industry. We think that's important because when political forces are trying to restrict gun ownership and gun use, you're also hurting our whole conservation system.
Absolutely.
And
And
so
that's something that hunters and shooters have rightfully been proud of, but may not fully have understood exactly what the implications are and how that affects. I mean, that is,
Right.
they're paying the tax because it's passed through in the price, but you're really actually the ones that are writing the check that
Yeah.
goes out to the state fish and wildlife agencies. And not every company, but the majority of gun and ammunition companies, all of the gun and ammunition, but majority of companies here at SHOT Show participate that in as well. That's how we fund. That is our part of this North American model of wildlife conservation that so many of us are so proud of, and I think it's important. So thank you for explaining that,
Well,
sir.
and that leads to the importance of keeping that user pays model intact, and actually getting back to something you said earlier, John, is the recruitment, retention, reactivation is because we will not get that money unless folks are continuing to purchase the product that
Right.
the excise tax is on. And so, Ryan, let me ask you this. I know that you've got a background in policy. You've worked in politics. How often are there attacks on the PR trust fund dollars? And what kind of involvement do you guys have with the states on what's appropriate to spend either on a yearly basis or every time it comes up for renewal?
Direct attacks at trying to go after the Pittman-Robertson Fund are fairly rare. What usually happens is when a state government gets into financial trouble and they see this pot of money called federal aid, usually in state budgets, and they'll try to get it. And it usually doesn't take very long for the Fish and Wildlife Service to write a letter to that state and say, well, if you do that, we're going to take away all your federal funding and
Well,
you're
and
gonna
not just
pay us
that,
back.
but it pay us back, exactly.
to pay us
That's
back.
usually a letter that comes that says
Right.
it's not just that you're going to lose that money, but all the money that we gave you that are match dollars for the programs that you're funding into that mean, and it comes to even more with not just rating those funds, but what the state is actually going to allocate back to
Right.
do those match funds. If they're going to try to divert those monies, it becomes a recognition that, oh, this is not just going to cost us these dollars, it's going to cost us about $2 million more or something like that, which they certainly can't come up with that much.
It's a big stick, and so I think the last time it came up, New York State, there was an effort to try to go after it.
Oh, Montana, we're dealing with it right now for our game wardens, funding for our game wardens. The legislature wanted upwards 50-60% because they saw the money, the budget situation.
Yeah.
Director in the department stepped in and said you can't do that. They compromised, I think, on 20% last biennial budget session. That means our wardens were actually not working on law enforcement issues 20% of the time because that wasn't an appropriate use of PR dollars. And now I just read the other day that they're back at the trough trying to get more of that money for the warden's cost. And I think that effort needs to be put to rest because of the consequences of that. So
I think as an industry, what specifically for the gun and ammo industry, the things that we've wanted to change about Pittman-Robertson in recent years is to enable states to be able to spend a little more of what they get on shooting range development. Because when we look at who pays the majority of the taxes that go into that fund, it's target shooters. So the critical habitat for shooters is shooting ranges. Right. And so having more ranges would generate more shooting, which would generate more tax, which would generate more conservation. So that's our thought. So as an industry, we've tried to create more flexibility, but not mandate that states, have to spend it on
that's
more on
the PR
ranges.
modernization bill that's come up. And, I think there was some ability to buy pen-raised birds for hunter recruitment and retention in there. I remember hearing something about that recently. But
yes, I don't remember. Somebody in the West proposed that. I think most of us would agree that that's probably not an appropriate use of Pittman-Robertson. The whole intent is to create habitat.
Well, living in a community that does not have a shooting range, I would really love to see more of that money going towards shooting range development, because it's crazy. We go out, and there's a couple ad hoc ranges, but we don't have a proper range, so it's really tough to go shoot, or when we do hunter ed or when we go to sight in our guns or to go shoot, we don't have a formal. We got to drive an hour.
Well, and that goes back into our recruitment, retention, reactivation, right? So if you want to try to get, it takes a hunter to make a hunter, takes a shooter to make a shooter. If you don't have a place to go, it's really hard for you to invite somebody to go along with you. And I know Colorado has invested in and is building a huge facility out in the western slope. We also have a facility down near Pueblo, Colorado Springs. And those are places where people can go and shoot on, and not privately run facilities, which are fine, and there's fine, but there's other opportunities. And again, take a hunter, take a shooter, make a hunter, make a shooter.
Oh, absolutely, and that's a big, it's a challenge when it talks about, the R3 programs, whether it's through conservation organizations or these youth shooting sports programs, is, when some of these programs are running 10, 20, 30,000 kids through, some of them even more than that, where you're talking in the hundreds of thousands of kids are getting the opportunity to participate in shooting sports, and they need a safe place to be able to do that. And so it's a challenge, and traveling around to, various states and regions, you'll find a lot of areas that have a lot of private clubs, and so people look and say, well, gosh, there's a lot of shooting clubs there, a lot of ability to go there. Well, not all of those private clubs you're able to go through if it comes to be, a deer season, for example, and having the opportunity to go and sight in and really go through there. They push you through and you get 5 rounds, and they say, oh, yeah, you can hit an 8-inch circle, 10-inch circle, and we got to move the next person through. So are you really getting that opportunity to be able to take your kids out there or be able to supplement and have a program to where they're actually, truly being able to get there and learn the skills that they need to and to be successful?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if you're going to do a 4-H program or a Boy Scout program, I mean, you need a facility. Those kinds of programs, just liability, but comfort level for parents. They want to be places, developed ranges. There's safety issues. And, we were pretty protective of maintaining the ability to shoot on BLM lands and things in the West, but we're seeing conflicts that pop up, and the solution for those conflicts is to have berms and shooting ranges that contain
designated
bullets
place.
Designated places where there's facilities where you can pick up your brass, and that you're not going to dump garbage out there and shoot up the
it's remarkable
television.
That people do that, isn't it?
Yeah.
The thing I like about shooting ranges is when I was younger and trying to learn more skills, every developed range I went to, there was always a couple folks hanging around willing to teach you.
Yeah.
Because that's what they did. They hung out there, they shot there, they were looking to impart their knowledge and skills onto those of us that were looking for it, particularly if we weren't very good.
They must have spent a lot of time with you, Steve.
Well, if you've ever shot with Ryan, you need to spend a lot of time out there, because he'll school you on the trap range and on the 5-stand and the other stuff. It's a remarkable.
It's humbling.
Yes,
Well,
very humbling.
It helps to work for a firearm and ammunition manufacturer.
Well, you would think, but finding time to get to the range is always the challenge.
For all of us, yeah.
But John Zinnel's a heck of a shot too.
Yeah.
In fact, he is coached a lot of young people. In fact, one of the young shooters that he's been developing is actually on our pro staff now and is a competitive shooter at 14 he shoots 200 in rows. And
yeah, he's 14 years old. When he first started, I remember him, coming out, and he was knee-high to a grasshopper wearing his Carhartt, and shooting a hand-me-down 20-gauge pump, and now he's shooting a $9,000 shotgun and pumping through 35,000 rounds a year and
Wow.
traveling to 7 states. And
What's his name?
At Grayson Stewart from
Okay.
Salt Lake City, and he at 14 now he's a 3-time All-American, and so his goals that he set when he first started and hit the age to where he could start shooting competitively, he wanted to be the first one ever to be a 5-time All-American sub-junior shooter, and so he's on 3 of 3 right now, going into his 4th year now, and setting the tone and just doing a great job and shooting and just the development that he's gotten through the shooting sports and the people that he's able to meet. I mean, we traveled around all over the place, and we'd go to a shoot up in Billings, Montana, or Reno, Nevada, or even here in Las Vegas, and take the opportunity. And him, his dad, would look over at me and be like, "Well, do you know where Grayson went?" I was like, "I don't." And we'd look around, and he's in the clubhouse, shooting the bull with all the old timers that are in there going through and doing that. And it's so great to see him, and he's such a personable person, and you see that so much with those development programs and the opportunity to go through and to learn that at a young age and really go through and have the opportunity to travel around and to meet those people like you were mentioning, Steve, on going to the range. And if you have a question and or a concern or something's coming up, or want to talk calibers or optics or whatever, a question, if you're getting prepared to go on your first antelope hunt or mule deer hunt or anything like that, there's people out there, and that's a big part of it, is to learn by that and to share those experiences.
Okay, so we are at SHOT Show. SHOT Show is when a whole bunch of new products are launched, and I know for sure that Federal's had a few of them. I was talking to your guy Jared on the range day the other day. Do you have anything specifically that you know of that is going to be a little bit on the game-changing side for mule deer hunters that mule deer hunters should be aware of?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest things this year on the big game side is that we are bringing back the Barnes triple shock bullet.
Okay.
So we started loading Barnes copper bullets back in the year 2000 and did for a long time. And a few years ago, there were some changes in the industry, and we stopped loading them for a few years. We still have our trophy copper bullet. We've got our Power Shock copper bullet, and we now have the Barnes triple shock back in the lineup. So we had a lot of people that became very loyal to that bullet, and I think that they're pretty happy that they're going to be able to go to the store and buy their favorite load again. So that's one of the things. We've brought back the AccuBonds across all of our lineup. So the Nosler AccuBond is a bullet that we let drop up from our lineup, but it's back and available again. And I think probably one of the most exciting things is the new caliber that we came out with last year, that we're coming out with some new options in the 224 Valkyrie, which is a really cool caliber. It's a screaming fast 224 bullet that we're able to achieve, for long distance shooters. At 1,300 yards, our bullet is still supersonic. High ballistic coefficients. It can shoot out of an AR. Savage is now loading or building a bolt action rifle for that caliber. So there's a lot of excitement behind that new caliber, and we're excited about those things. Those are probably the big.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the it's a 110 Prairie Hunter is that model in the 224 Valkyrie for a bolt gun, and they also came out with a new Model 110 High Country. So that's going to be in a whole array of calibers right now. They're run it in the 6.5 Creedmoor, which obviously is a very popular caliber, and that one having a spirally fluted and having the bolt all done, and so it's a real lightweight option to be able to go through with their new stock. And so as far as the mule deer hunter, I think those things are really going to be a popular one. And on that, in the West and anywhere for that matter, when you talk about a lot of those mule deer hunters and elk hunters and deer hunters and so forth are out there and participating in predator hunting and those types of things. Primos came out with a new e-collar. They've relaunched a whole new model and structure through there, and so you'll start to see those hitting the market now too, and that's just it's an amazing product, and excited to get it out there to all those enthusiasts too.
So Savage and Primos are sister companies of ours that are all part of the greater Vista Corporation.
Gotcha.
Well,
and Savage, I know last year you came out with your AccuFit stock as well, and I know that's launching into a number more calibers and different gun formations too. Mm-hmm. But that allows for women, kids, shorter stature, taller stature, higher cheekbone. It's a pretty cool innovation for sure.
Absolutely. So you're able to go and have that firearm, and by taking out a couple screws, you're able to adjust, that length of pull, so you can go from a small stature or a 10-year-old or 13-year-old or whatever the case may be, all the way up to somebody that's a little bit larger frame, to where they can use that same gun and have those modifications without having to go to the gunsmith and having it done. So that's a huge thing for everybody that knows that, wanting to have that rifle to fit you correctly is a very important deal.
Well, here's the other thing that's important, though, for people with federal. The packaging is going to look different on your shells, on your rounds now, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, you rebranded some of those and you changed your packaging. So it's important to look. And
so the blue box won't be the...
Well, it'll still be blue, but
Okay.
it'll look slightly different. But we've changed the colors on our premium packaging, so it's gold and black instead of the old red and gold. So it'll stand out, and it's our logo has been tweaked slightly. Look, John and I are the conservation guys.
We're not to product guys.
We're not.
You guys have some bang up PR guys. I know that, but
We do, and JJ Reich is the best PR guy in the
We've
industry.
heard
I
that.
heard
I've
that a
heard
couple
that.
days ago. It was an amazing proposition.
job,
and it's
JJ.
carried on.
I will
Yeah,
agree.
Yeah.
We need to get him on the On Gravel podcast as well, I think. But,
Yeah, we should.
So that packaging changes it's not always first in mind for us, but we think that our new packaging is going to make it a lot easier for the consumer. They're going to find the caliber, the grain weight, the bullet style. They're going to know all those things. For those folks that are in California, for instance, that need to shoot non-lead, we've got a lead-free button on all of our California-approved loads, so it'll be easier to find them. Now, that'll be pretty much all you can find in California, now.
Maybe.
Now, on the conservation side, is there anything new on the horizon that Federal is going to be getting involved in that you see is going to be taking up a lot more of your time, Ryan, or anything that's exciting, John, coming from your angle?
Well, from my angle, I'm working with the council to advance hunting and shooting sports with their R3 implementation. So they've got this big master R3 plan, and working with all the state agencies, bringing in the conservation organizations and all these youth shooting sports. And they have the plan, and it came out several years ago, and now they went back and found out, well, now they're trying to figure out the issues with implementation, right? So everybody's kind of gone off in their same direction. And so what can we do and come together? So we've built a whole committee that has state agency, has NGOs, has industry representatives, to be able to talk about those things, to move everybody forward together, right? So we're all marching to the same drum. We're able to go out there and then share information, right? So the M.U.L.E.Y program that's going out there, so it doesn't matter whether it's a M.U.L.E.Y program in Arizona or something in Wyoming, is able to share information and data of best practices with, say a QDMA or a Pheasants Forever or another critter groups doing a program in Georgia or Minnesota or Iowa, to share that information across the board and to open up those doors and take down the walls and work across the lines and really participate together. And I know, when we were really launching that M.U.L.E.Y program, that was a big deal, was to just not come in there and reinvent the wheel, not go in there and build a brand new, all crazy good youth program, but to say, hey, let's have some structure, let's have some opportunities to bring our chapters into the fold and open the doors to those other local, conservation organizations that are there. So it's not just coming in there and running everything as Mule Deer Foundation and the M.U.L.E.Y program, but it opened up the door for other organizations, state agencies, those local shooting clubs and organizations there, if there's not a big public range or a facility there to go and do it. And it's been successful. I mean, they're running tens of thousands of kids, and not only kids, but bringing the family as the aspect into it. I think that's a big important part.
So I think from the policy side, the last couple of years, the big things that we've been working on is protecting public lands. And frankly, with the new configuration in Congress, I think some of those attacks on public lands are not as big of a deal. I think it's less likely for them to get traction in Congress, and our focus really for probably the next 2 years and into the future is gun rights, and Second Amendment things are going to be pretty critical for our business and for conservation as well. So I think that's not that we're going to stop being defenders of public lands, because we are champions of public lands. Right. It's critical to our business. But I think the higher priorities for us is protecting gun rights for the next 2 years and longer.
Well, excellent. Thank you guys for the time you do. Thank you also. I know Federal and Vista are big sponsors of the Western Hunting and Conservation Expo, so thank you for that and all your support and your hard work in the past and for the future for Mule Deer Foundation and our members. Thank you for taking your time today.
Yeah, thank
This
you guys.
Jodi Stemler saying goodbye.
And I'm Steve Belinda. Until we talk to you next time, thank you for Talking Mule Deer.
Thanks for talking Mule Deer with Steve Belinda and Jodi Stemler. The Mule Deer Foundation is the only conservation group in North America dedicated to restoring, improving, and protecting mule deer and black-tailed deer and their habitat. MDF is a strong voice for hunters in access, wildlife management, and conservation policy issues. To find out more, visit www.muledeer.org and stay tuned for the next episode of Talkin' Mule Deer.